The massive space station hung in the void like a metal city. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its many ports. Inside the Great Hall, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for an important meeting. Today, they would decide if humanity could join their council. Kang Dae-ho straightened his formal uniform as he walked into the chamber. The human ambassador had prepared for this moment for months. Around him, alien beings of all shapes and sizes filled the curved seats. Some looked like giant insects with 4 arms. Others appeared to be living crystals that sparkled in the light. The largest ones stood 12 feet tall with purple skin and glowing eyes. The chamber fell quiet as Council Prime Vextal called the meeting to order. The being's voice came through translators attached to every seat. Today, we examine the military capabilities of the species called humans, it announced. Dae-ho stood and activated the holographic display in the center of the room. Images of Earth's weapons appeared in the air above them. Rifles, pistols, tanks, and artillery pieces rotated slowly for all to see. "These are our primary weapons," Dae-ho said clearly. "We use projectiles made of metal fired by chemical explosives. Our larger weapons include missiles with chemical warheads and cannons that fire solid shells." The chamber remained silent for several seconds. Then a sound began to fill the air. It started as a low rumble from the insect-like Kalari. The crystal beings began to chime in harmony. Even the giant Vorthak made deep laughing sounds. They were all laughing at humanity's weapons. General Kroon of the Vorthak stood up. His massive form cast a shadow over the human display. "You bring us toys from your past," he said through his translator. "We left such primitive tools behind thousands of years ago." The general activated his own display. A sleek device appeared in the hologram. It looked like nothing more than a metal tube with crystal parts inside. "This is a molecular disruptor," Kroon explained. "Watch." A thick steel plate materialized in the display. The Vorthak weapon fired a beam of pure energy. The steel began to dissolve instantly, turning into glowing particles that scattered in all directions. In seconds, nothing remained of the metal. "Your bullets bounce off armor," Kroon said with amusement. "Our weapons destroy the very atoms that make up our enemies." Fleet Leader Zixandra of the Kalari activated her own demonstration. Organic-looking weapons appeared in the hologram. They moved and writhed like living things. "Our bio-weapons adapt to any target," she explained. "They learn and grow stronger with each battle. Your chemical explosives are like firecrackers compared to our living artillery." One by one, each alien species showed off their advanced weapons. The crystal beings demonstrated energy manipulation devices that could bend light and matter. The machine-like thymons revealed weapons that fired compressed time itself, aging targets to dust in milliseconds. Dr. Park Soo-jin sat quietly beside Dae-ho throughout the demonstrations. The military expert took careful notes on a simple tablet. Her face showed no emotion as each alien species mocked humanity's weapons. She watched every detail of their technology with scientific interest. Perhaps humans should focus on trade instead of military matters. suggested Vextall when the demonstrations ended. Your species clearly has much to learn about modern warfare. Several alien representatives voiced agreement. The Vorthak general shook his massive head in disappointment. How did a species with such basic weapons even achieve space travel? He wondered aloud. Deho felt heat rise in his face, but kept his voice calm. Our weapons may seem simple to you, he said, but they have served us well for centuries. We have fought many wars and learned from each one. Wars against other primitives with the same basic weapons, laughed a Kalari officer. You have never faced true military technology. Dr. Park Soo-jin finally spoke up. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's translation system. We would like to request permission to observe your military operations, she said. Perhaps we can learn from your advanced methods. The alien representatives exchanged glances. Several seemed amused by the request. You wish to see real weapons in action? Asked General Kroon. Yes, Park Soo-jin replied simply. We are always interested in learning new things. Vextall consulted with other council members through private communication channels. After several minutes, the Council Prime announced their decision. Very well. Humanity may observe our next military operation as junior partners. Perhaps you will understand why your weapons are obsolete. The meeting continued for another hour as the aliens discussed technical details of their military alliance. They spoke of energy shields that could stop any projectile, armor that adapted to incoming attacks, and weapons that could destroy entire fleets with single shots. Dae-ho and Park Soo-jin listened carefully to every word. They asked few questions, but paid attention to everything they heard. When other species mentioned weaknesses in their enemies or problems with their weapons, the humans took note. As the meeting ended, alien representatives approached the human delegation with what seemed like pity. Do not feel ashamed of your primitive weapons, said a crystal being whose name translated as Bright Singer. All species must start somewhere in their development. Perhaps in a few thousand years your people will create real weapons, added a Vorthak officer. Until then, you should stay far from any actual fighting. The humans thanked their new allies politely and made arrangements to join the next military operation. As they walked through the station's corridors toward their ship, other aliens pointed and whispered about the species that still used gunpowder and metal bullets. Back aboard the human transport ship, Dae-ho finally allowed his frustration to show. Did you hear how they talked to us? He asked Park Soo-jin. Like we were children playing with sticks and stones. Park Soo-jin studied her notes carefully. They certainly have impressive technology, she admitted. But did you notice something interesting about all their demonstrations? What do you mean? Every single weapon they showed us uses some form of energy, Park Soo-jin explained. Plasma beams, particle streams, quantum manipulators, bioelectric discharges, all energy-based attacks. Dae-ho thought about this for a moment. So? Park Soo-jin smiled for the first time since the meeting began. So they've forgotten something important about warfare. Energy can be redirected, absorbed, or adapted to. But you can't argue with a chunk of metal moving at high speed. You think our weapons might actually be useful? I think, Park Soo-jin said while reviewing the technical data they had gathered, that these aliens have been fighting the same type of war for so long that they've forgotten there are other ways to destroy things. The human ship set course for the rendezvous point where they would join the alien fleet. Neither Dae-ho nor Park Soo-jin mentioned their growing suspicion that the galaxy's most advanced military forces might have a serious blind spot. 3 days later, they received word of their first mission. An ancient enemy had returned to threaten the galaxy. The alien alliance was assembling their greatest fleet to face this threat. The humans would finally see advanced warfare in action. 3 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council as junior members. During that time, Kang Dae-ho had attended countless meetings about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. The military demonstrations seemed like a distant memory until the emergency session was called. The council chamber buzzed with urgent activity. Alien representatives spoke in hushed tones while emergency broadcasts played on multiple screens. Dr. Park Soo-jin watched the footage with growing concern. Entire star systems were simply gone, leaving nothing but empty space where planets once orbited. "The Devourers have returned," announced Council Prime Vextal. The translation system struggled to convey the fear in the alien leader's voice. After 10,000 years of silence, they have emerged from the galaxy's edge. Admiral Choi Woo-sung leaned forward in his seat. The human military commander had arrived from Earth just days earlier to represent humanity's space forces. "What exactly are these Devourers?" he asked. General Kroon of the Vorthak stood to address the assembly. His massive form seemed less intimidating now, marked by obvious worry. "They are machines built by a race that died out long ago," he explained. "These devices consume everything they encounter. Planets, stars, entire solar systems disappear into their ships." Fleet leader Zixandra activated a holographic display showing the enemy vessels. The ships looked like geometric nightmares, all sharp angles and impossible curves. They seemed to bend light around them, making it difficult to see their true shape. "Our ancestors fought them once before," she continued. "It took the combined fleets of 50 worlds to drive them away. We lost billions of lives in that war." The crystal being called Bright Singer chimed sadly. "They adapt to any weapon used against them. Energy attacks become useless after the first few hits. They learn from every battle and become stronger." Admiral Choi studied the images carefully. The Devourer ships showed signs of advanced technology beyond anything he had seen from the Council races. "How many ships are we facing?" he asked. "Our scouts report at least 300 vessels," answered Vextal. "But more appear each day. They seem to be building new ships from the matter they consume." The Council spent the next hour planning their response. Representatives from dozens of worlds offered their most advanced warships and weapons. The Vorthak would provide their molecular disruptors and plasma cannons. The Kalari offered their bioweapons and adaptive fighters. Every race contributed their best technology to face this ancient threat. Finally, Vextal turned to the human delegation. "What can your people contribute to this effort?" the Council Prime asked. Admiral Choi stood proudly. "Earth can provide 12 destroyers and 1 carrier," he announced. Our ships carry conventional weapons and nuclear missiles. The chamber fell silent. After a moment, quiet laughter began to ripple through the alien representatives. The same reaction humans had faced 3 months earlier returned in full force. "Conventional weapons?" repeated General Kroon with obvious disbelief. "Against enemies that adapt to energy attacks, you offer metal bullets and chemical explosives?" "With respect, Admiral," said Fleet Leader Zixandra, "your ships would be destroyed in the first few minutes of battle. The Devourer's armor can withstand direct hits from our most powerful weapons." Bright Singer chimed in agreement. "Perhaps it would be better if your ships remained at a safe distance," the crystal being suggested. "You could observe the battle and learn from it." Admiral Choi felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. "Our crews are ready to fight alongside your forces," he insisted. "We may not have the most advanced weapons, but we know how to use what we have." The alien commanders exchanged glances that clearly communicated their doubts. After a brief discussion, Vexatal made the final decision. "Very well. Human ships may join the fleet, but they will be positioned in the rear formation for their own protection." Captain Lee Min-ho of the destroyer Soul's Pride listened to this exchange through his communication equipment. His ship was already en route to the assembly point along with the rest of the human fleet. The captain had served in Earth's military for 15 years and had never backed down from a fight. "Sir," called Communications Officer Kim Yu-ri from her station, "I'm picking up chatter from the alien ships. They're discussing our fleet." "What are they saying?" asked Lee Min-ho. Kim Yuri's translation software worked to convert the various alien languages. "The Kalari are calling our ships primitive metal coffins. A Vorthak commander just referred to our weapons as ancient relics. They're betting on how long we'll last in actual combat." Lee Min-ho gritted his teeth. His destroyer carried the most advanced weapons Earth could produce, railguns that could fire tungsten rods at incredible speeds, missile systems with nuclear warheads, armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate, the thickest shields. Yet to these aliens, they were toys. "Any word from Admiral Choi?" he asked. "Yes, sir. All human ships are to take position at the back of the formation when we reach the assembly point. We're officially listed as observation vessels in the battle plan." The captain looked out at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, an enemy was approaching that had terrified the galaxy for thousands of years. The most advanced military forces known to exist were assembling to face this threat. And humanity was being treated like children who needed protection. 2 days later, the combined fleet assembled in deep space. Over 800 ships from 30 different worlds formed the largest military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. Massive Vorthak dreadnoughts bristled with energy weapons. Elegant Kalari bioships pulsed with living weapons systems. Crystal formations that served as Thyman warships sparkled with contained power. At the back of the formation, 12 human destroyers and 1 carrier looked tiny by comparison. Captain Bae Soo-young of Busan's Hammer watched the alien ships through her view screen. Each vessel represented technology humanity could barely understand. "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" commented her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Song Jae-wook. "Size isn't everything," replied Bae Soo-young. "My grandfather used to tell stories about fighting in the old wars on Earth. Sometimes the side with the fanciest weapons loses to the side that wants to win more." Engineer Yoon Hae-jin looked up from his console. "Captain, I've been monitoring the alien weapon systems. They're all incredibly sophisticated, but they have one thing in common." "What's that?" "Every single weapon system relies on energy projection of some kind. Plasma beams, particle accelerators, quantum manipulators. Even their defensive systems are designed to counter energy-based attacks." Bae Soo-young considered this information. "And our weapons? Kinetic energy, sir. Pure physics. A tungsten rod. Moving at high velocity doesn't care about energy shields or adaptive armor. It just punches through whatever's in the way." Before the captain could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Long-range sensors had detected the enemy approaching. The Devourers were coming. Fleet communications crackled with activity as alien commanders coordinated their battle plans. The human ships received their orders last and with obvious reluctance from the alien command structure. "Human vessels," came the transmission from the Vorthak flagship, "maintain position at maximum safe distance. Do not engage enemy forces without direct orders. Your role is to observe and learn." Admiral Choi's voice cut through the communication channel from the carrier Incheon. "All human ships, acknowledge orders and prepare for battle. Stay alert and ready for anything." Captain Lee Min-ho acknowledged the orders along with his fellow commanders, but privately he began reviewing his ship's weapon systems. The Soul's Pride carried enough firepower to level a small city. If the aliens thought humanity would just sit back and watch, they were about to learn something new about human nature. The enemy fleet appeared on sensors like a dark stain spreading across space. 300 geometric ships moved in perfect formation, their strange hulls seeming to absorb light itself. The Devourers had returned to finish what they started 10,000 years ago. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a spreading shadow. Their ships defied easy description, appearing as geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to bend space around them, making it impossible to judge their true size or distance. Captain Lee Min-ho watched from the Soul's Pride as the alien alliance moved into attack formation. The Vorthak dreadnoughts took the lead, their massive hulls bristling with energy weapons. Behind them, the elegant bioships of the Kalari writhed with anticipation. Crystal formations carrying Thyman warriors sparkled as they charged their quantum manipulators. "Beautiful formation," commented Lieutenant Song Jae-wook from his position at the tactical station. "They move like they've practiced this dance 1,000 times." "Probably have," replied Lee Min-ho. "These races have been fighting together for centuries." The human ships hung back at the rear of the formation, officially positioned for their own safety. Admiral Choi's carrier Incheon floated among them like a mother bird protecting her chicks. Around them, Communications Officer Kim Yuri continued monitoring alien chatter. "The Vorthak are confident, sir," she reported. They're saying their molecular disruptors will tear through the Devourer hulls like paper. The Kalari think their bioweapons will adapt faster than the enemy can respond. "What about the crystal beings?" asked Lee Minho. "The Thymans are, well, their language doesn't translate well, but they seem excited about testing their time compression weapons against ancient technology." The first shots came from the Vorthak flagship. Brilliant beams of energy reached across space to strike the leading Devourer vessel. The molecular disruptor hit its target dead center, and for a moment it seemed like the ancient ship might dissolve, just like the steel plate in the demonstration. Instead, the geometric hull absorbed the energy beam completely. The ship's surface rippled like water, then returned to its original form without any visible damage. "Interesting," muttered engineer Yoon Hai-jin from his station. Their hull just redistributed the molecular disruption across its entire surface area. More beams lanced out from the alien fleet. Plasma cannons fired superheated matter at incredible speeds. Particle accelerators launched streams of charged atoms. Bioweapons spat living projectiles that moved and adapted as they flew through space. For the first hour of battle, it looked like the advanced weapons were working. Several Devourer scout ships exploded under concentrated fire from multiple alien vessels. The geometric formations began to shift and change as the enemy fleet adapted to the assault. "They're learning," observed Rear Admiral Nam Gite from his position aboard the Incheon. "Look how they're repositioning after each successful hit." Dr. Park Soo-jin studied the battle data streaming to their computers. "The Devourers aren't just learning tactics," she noted. "Their hulls are actually changing composition. Each ship that gets hit is sharing information with the others." As if to prove her point, the next wave of energy weapons had dramatically reduced effectiveness. Plasma beams that had punched through Devourer armor now splashed harmlessly across their hulls. Particle streams bent around the geometric ships as if the vessels had become immune to such attacks. "Impossible," breathed General Kroon over the communication channel. "Our weapons are losing power with each shot." Fleet Leader Zixandra sounded, confused and worried. "My bioweapons are dying before they reach their targets. It's like the enemy ships are poisoning the space around them." The crystal formations of the Thymans tried their time compression weapons. The exotic devices fired bursts of accelerated time itself, designed to age targets to dust in seconds. But the Devourer ships seemed unaffected, as if time flowed differently. Around their hulls. "Captain," called Kim Yuri urgently. "The alien fleet is taking heavy casualties now. 3 Vorthak cruisers just exploded. The Kalari bioships are falling back." Lee Min-ho watched in horror as the most advanced weapons in the galaxy became increasingly useless. The Devourers had adapted to every form of energy attack the Alliance could produce. Now they began their counterattack. The enemy weapons defied easy categorization. Some fired beams that seemed to unmake whatever they touched. Others launched projectiles that passed through armor and shields as if they weren't there. A few Devourer ships simply pointed at their targets, and the alien vessels began tearing themselves apart from the inside. "They're getting slaughtered out there," said Song Jae-wook quietly. "The enemy is using their own technology against them," Park Soo-jin observed. Those weapons are modified versions of what the Alliance just fired. The Devourers absorbed the energy attacks and learned to replicate them. Admiral Choi's voice crackled over the communication system. All human vessels, maintain position and continue observing. We need to understand what we're facing before we act. On the main display, the battle continued to turn against the Alliance. Ship after ship fell to weapons that had been their own just minutes before. The Devourers seemed to anticipate every move, counter every strategy, and adapt to every new weapon the aliens tried. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Han Dong-min, "I'm detecting something unusual about the enemy adaptive technology." "What kind of unusual?" asked Lee Min-ho. "It appears to be specifically designed for energy-based threats. Look at these readings." Han Dong-min brought up a detailed analysis on his screen. "The Devourer hulls are absorbing and redistributing energy attacks, but their adaptive matrix shows no response to kinetic threats." "Kinetic threats?" "Physical impact, sir. The kind of damage caused by solid objects moving at high speed." Park Soo-jin leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying their technology doesn't know how to adapt to bullets and explosives?" "More than that," replied Han Dong-min. "Based on these scans, their adaptive systems might not even recognize kinetic weapons as a threat. They're so focused on energy manipulation that they've ignored basic physics." Lee Min-ho felt something stirring in his chest. It wasn't fear or excitement, but a familiar feeling from his military training. The feeling of recognizing an enemy's weakness. "Communications," he ordered. "Patch me through to all human vessels on a secure channel." "Channel open, sir." "This is Captain Lee Min-ho to all human ships. I want damage assessments on our kinetic weapon systems, railguns, missile systems, conventional explosives, everything that doesn't use energy projection." Reports came back quickly. Every human ship was fully armed and operational. Their primitive weapons were ready for battle. "Captain," called Kim Yuri, "I'm receiving a priority message from the Alien Fleet Command. They're ordering all ships to prepare for emergency retreat." Lee Min-ho looked at the tactical display. The Alliance fleet had lost nearly half its ships. The survivors were falling back in disorder while Devourer vessels advanced steadily. But something in the enemy formation caught his attention. "Look at their positioning," he said to his bridge crew. "They're not worried about us at all. The Devourers are completely ignoring the human ships." "Why would they do that?" asked Song Jae-wook. Park Soo-jin smiled grimly. "Because to them, we're not a threat. Our weapons are so primitive that their scanning systems probably classify us as space debris." Admiral Choi's voice came over the communication system again. "All human ships, prepare for possible engagement. If the Alliance retreats, we may be the only thing standing between these machines and inhabited worlds." Lee Min-ho felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 12 destroyers, and one carrier against an enemy that had just defeated the most advanced fleet in galactic history. By any reasonable measure, it was suicide. But as he looked at the readings from the Devourer adaptive systems, Lee Min-ho began to think that reasonable measures might not apply to this situation. "All stations, battle stations," he ordered. "Prepare. Kinetic weapons for combat. We're about to find out if old-fashioned warfare still has a place in the galaxy. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a spreading shadow. Their ships defied easy description, appearing as geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to bend space around them, making it impossible to judge their true size or distance. Captain Lee Min-ho watched from the Soul's Pride as the alien alliance moved into attack formation. The Vorthak dreadnoughts took the lead, their massive hulls bristling with energy weapons. Behind them, the elegant bio-ships of the Kalari writhed with anticipation. Crystal formations carrying Thyman warriors sparkled as they charged their quantum manipulators. Beautiful formation, commented Lieutenant Song Jae-wook from his position at the tactical station. They move like they've practiced this dance 1,000 times. Probably have, replied Lee Min-ho. These races have been fighting together for centuries. The human ships hung back at the rear of the formation, officially positioned for their own safety. Admiral Choi's carrier Incheon floated among them like a mother bird protecting her chicks. Around them, Communications Officer Kim Yuri continued monitoring alien chatter. "The Vorthak are confident, sir," she reported. "They're saying their molecular disruptors will tear through the Devourer hulls like paper. The Kalari think their bioweapons will adapt faster than the enemy can respond." "What about the crystal beings?" asked Lee Min-ho. "The Thymans are, well, their language doesn't translate well, but they seem excited about testing their time compression weapons against ancient technology." The first shots came from the Vorthak flagship. Brilliant beams of energy reached across space to strike the leading Devourer vessel. The molecular disruptor hit its target dead center. And for a moment it seemed like the ancient ship might dissolve, just like the steel plate in the demonstration. Instead, the geometric hull absorbed the energy beam completely. The ship's surface rippled like water, then returned to its original form without any visible damage. "Interesting," muttered Engineer Yoon Hai-jin from his station. Their hull just redistributed the molecular disruption across its entire surface area. More beams lanced out from the alien fleet. Plasma cannons fired superheated matter at incredible speeds. Particle accelerators launched streams of charged atoms. Bioweapons spat living projectiles that moved and adapted as they flew through space. For the first hour of battle, it looked like the advanced weapons were working. Several Devourer scout ships exploded under concentrated fire from multiple alien vessels. The geometric formations began to shift and change as the enemy fleet adapted to the assault. "They're learning," observed Rear Admiral Nam Gi-tae from his position aboard the Incheon. "Look how they're repositioning after each successful hit." Dr. Park Soo-jin studied the battle data streaming to their computers. "The Devourers aren't just learning tactics," she noted. "Their hulls are actually changing composition. Each ship that gets hit is sharing information with the others." As if to prove her point, the next wave of energy weapons had dramatically reduced effectiveness. Plasma beams that had punched through Devourer armor now splashed harmlessly across their hulls. Particle streams bent around the geometric ships as if the vessels had become immune to such attacks. "Impossible," breathed General Kroon over the communication channel. "Our weapons are losing power with each shot." Fleet leader Zix Andra sounded. confused and worried. My bioweapons are dying before they reach their targets. It's like the enemy ships are poisoning the space around them. The crystal formations of the Thymons tried their time compression weapons. The exotic devices fired bursts of accelerated time itself, designed to age targets to dust in seconds. But the Devourer ships seemed unaffected, as if time flowed differently around their hulls. "Captain," called Kim Yuri urgently, "the alien fleet is taking heavy casualties now. 3 Vorthak cruisers just exploded. The Kalari bioships are falling back." Lee Min-ho watched in horror as the most advanced weapons in the galaxy became increasingly useless. The Devourers had adapted to every form of energy attack the Alliance could produce. Now they began their counterattack. The enemy weapons defied easy categorization. Some fired beams that seemed to unmake whatever they touched. Others launched projectiles that passed through armor and shields as if they weren't there. A few Devourer ships simply pointed at their targets, and the alien vessels began tearing themselves apart from the inside. "They're getting slaughtered out there," said Song Jae-wook quietly. "The enemy is using their own technology against them." Park Soo-jin observed. "Those weapons are modified versions of what the Alliance just fired. The Devourers absorbed the energy attacks and learned to replicate them." Admiral Choi's voice crackled over the communication system. "All human vessels, maintain position and continue observing. We need to understand what we're facing before we act." On the main display, the battle continued to turn against the Alliance. Ship after ship fell to weapons that had been their own just minutes before. The Devourers seemed to anticipate every move, counter every strategy, and adapt to every new weapon the aliens tried. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Han Dong-min, "I'm detecting something unusual about the enemy adaptive technology." "What kind of unusual?" asked Lee Min-ho. "It appears to be specifically designed for energy-based threats. Look at these readings." Han Dong-min brought up a detailed analysis on his screen. The Devourer hulls are absorbing and redistributing energy attacks, but their adaptive matrix shows no response to kinetic threats. "Kinetic threats?" "Physical impact, sir. The kind of damage caused by solid objects moving at high speed." Park Soo-jin leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying their technology doesn't know how to adapt to bullets and explosives?" "More than that," replied Han Dong-min. "Based on these scans, their adaptive systems might not even recognize kinetic weapons as a threat. They're so focused on energy manipulation that they've ignored basic physics." Lee Min-ho felt something stirring in his chest. It wasn't fear or excitement, but a familiar feeling from his military training, the feeling of recognizing an enemy's weakness. "Communications," he ordered. "Patch me through to all human vessels on a secure channel." "Channel open, sir." "This is Captain Lee Min-ho to all human ships. I want damage assessments on our kinetic weapon systems, railguns, missile systems, conventional explosives. Everything that doesn't use energy projection." Reports came back quickly. Every human ship was fully armed and operational. Their primitive weapons were ready for battle. "Captain," called Kim Yuri, "I'm receiving a priority message from the Alien Fleet Command. They're ordering all ships to prepare for emergency retreat." Lee Min-ho looked at the tactical display. The Alliance fleet had lost nearly half its ships. The survivors were falling back in disorder while devourer vessels advanced steadily. But something in the enemy formation caught his attention. "Look at their positioning," he said to his bridge crew. "They're not worried about us at all. The devourers are completely ignoring the human ships." "Why would they do that?" asked Song Jae-wook. Park Soo-jin smiled grimly. "Because to them, we're not a threat. Our weapons are so primitive that their scanning systems probably classify us as space debris." Admiral Choi's voice came over the communication system again. "All human ships, prepare for possible engagement. If the Alliance retreats, we may be the only thing standing between these machines and inhabited worlds." Lee Min-ho felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 12 destroyers, and 1 carrier against an enemy that had just defeated the most advanced fleet in galactic history. By any reasonable measure, it was suicide. But as he looked at the readings from the Devourer adaptive systems, Lee Min-ho began to think that reasonable measures might not apply to this situation. "All stations, battle stations," he ordered. "Prepare. Kinetic weapons for combat. We're about to find out if old-fashioned warfare still has a place in the galaxy." The alien retreat was becoming a rout. Captain Bae Soo-young watched from the bridge of Busan's Hammer as the most advanced warships in the galaxy fled in disorder. Massive Vorthak dreadnoughts that had seemed invincible now limped away with their hulls torn open. The elegant bioships of the Kalari were dying, their living weapons turning against them as the devourers corrupted their biological systems. "Captain," called Lieutenant Song Jae-wook from the communication station, "Admiral Choi is requesting a conference with all human ship commanders." Put him through on the main screen. Admiral Choi's weathered face appeared before them, broadcasting from the carrier Incheon. Behind him, the bridge crew worked frantically to analyze the battle data. "Captains, our situation has changed dramatically. The Alliance fleet is retreating, but the Devourers are moving to cut off their escape route." Captain Lee Min-ho of Seoul's Pride spoke first. "Admiral, if we stay here, we'll be trapped just like them." "Perhaps," replied Choi. "But if we retreat now, the Devourers will have a clear path to at least 6 inhabited systems. Billions of lives are at stake." On the tactical display, the geometry of the trap became clear. The Devourer fleet was splitting into 2 groups. One continued to pursue the fleeing alien ships. The other was moving to intercept any retreat through hyperspace. In the middle, the 13 human vessels hung like islands in an ocean of death. Dr. Park Soo-jin appeared on the communication screen beside Admiral Choi. "I've been analyzing the battle data," she reported. "The Devourer's adaptive technology is incredibly sophisticated, but it has one critical limitation." "What kind of limitation?" asked Captain Oh Se-jin from the carrier's fighter squadrons. "It only adapts to energy-based attacks. Every weapon the Alliance used projected some form of energy. Plasma, particles, quantum fields, biological electricity. The Devourers absorbed that energy and learned to counter it." Captain Kwon Hyo-jin of Daegu's Resolve leaned forward. "But our weapons don't use energy projection." "Exactly," confirmed Park Soo-jin. "Kinetic weapons rely on mass and velocity. A tungsten rod moving at high speed is just physics. There's nothing for their adaptive systems to absorb or counter. Admiral Choi's expression was grim but determined. The question is whether 13 ships can do what 800 couldn't. Sir, interrupted Engineer Yoon Hai-jin from Seoul's Pride, I've been running calculations on the Devourer formation. They're completely ignoring us. Their scanning systems probably can't even classify our weapons as threats. That could be our advantage, suggested Bae Su-young. If they don't see us coming, we might get close enough to do real damage. The communication channel fell silent as each captain considered the implications. They were discussing attacking an enemy that had just destroyed the most powerful fleet in galactic history. The logical choice was retreat. But then Lieutenant Commander Nam Gi-tae spoke up from his position on the Incheon. Admiral, I'm receiving emergency transmissions from the planet Kepler 442b. It's a Thymon colony with 8 million inhabitants. The Devourers will reach it in 6 hours if they maintain current course. The math was simple and brutal. The retreating alien fleet couldn't regroup in time to defend the planet. The human ships were the only force positioned to intercept the enemy. Admiral Choi made his decision. All ships, this is Admiral Choi. I'm ordering a full attack on the Devourer fleet. We will use maximum kinetic firepower and conventional explosives. Rules of engagement are simple. If it's not human, shoot it. Captain Lee Min-ho felt his pulse quicken. Admiral, what about our positioning? We're supposed to stay in the rear formation. Our new position is wherever we can do the most damage, replied Choi firmly. All ships break formation and attack. The human fleet scattered like a pack of wolves. 12 destroyers accelerated toward the enemy formation while the carrier Incheon launched its fighter squadrons. Their chemical rockets seemed pathetically slow compared to the exotic propulsion systems of the alien ships. But they had one crucial advantage. The Devourers weren't paying attention to them. Target selection? Asked Tactical Officer Han Dong-min. Aboard Seoul's Pride. The biggest ship you can find, ordered Lee Min-ho. Let's see how their adaptive armor handles a railgun. The Seoul's Pride adjusted course toward a massive Devourer vessel that dwarfed even the Vorthak dreadnoughts. Its geometric hull twisted space around it, making it difficult to target accurately. But Han Dong-min had trained for years to hit. Moving targets in space. Railgun charged and ready, sir. Fire! The tungsten rod left the railgun at nearly 10% of light speed. It crossed the distance to the Devourer ship in microseconds, too fast for any point defense system to intercept. The projectile struck the geometric hull with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The result was spectacular. The Devourer's adaptive armor, designed to absorb and redistribute energy attacks, had no response to simple kinetic impact. The tungsten rod punched through the hull like it was made of paper, tearing a massive hole in the ship's side. Direct. Hit! Shouted Han Dong-min. The target is venting atmosphere and debris. Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out as each destroyer opened fire with kinetic weapons. Captain Kwon Hyo-jin's Daegu's Resolve launched a spread of conventional missiles. The Devourer's point defense systems, calibrated for energy. Projectiles barely reacted to the incoming warheads. The explosions that followed lit up space like miniature suns. Chemical explosives and nuclear warheads detonated against hulls that had shrugged off molecular disruptors and quantum manipulators. The Devourer ships began taking real damage for the first time in the battle. "This is impossible," came a transmission from the retreating alien fleet. General Kroon's voice carried disbelief and confusion. "How are primitive weapons succeeding where our advanced technology failed?" "Because sometimes the old ways are the best ways," replied Admiral Choi, as he watched his ships tear into the enemy formation. But the Devourers were far from helpless. As soon as they realized they were under attack, they began to turn their weapons on the human ships. Beams of destructive energy reached out across space, designed to unmake whatever they touched. The destroyer Ulsan's Pride took a direct hit from what looked like a concentrated stream of unmaking. But instead of dissolving like the alien ships had, Captain No Tae-kyung's vessel simply lost its forward armor plating. "Damage report," called No Tae-kyung. "Forward hull breached, but the ship is intact," reported his engineer. "Their weapon appears to be designed for targets that use energy shielding. Our plain steel armor is too simple for it to affect properly." The realization spread through the human fleet like wildfire. The Devourers' weapons were as specialized as their defenses. They had become so sophisticated that they couldn't deal with basic technology. Fighter pilot An Young-soo led his squadron in a strafing run against a cluster of smaller Devourer ships. His fighters carried nothing more advanced than autocannons loaded with depleted uranium rounds. The enemy point defense systems, designed to stop energy projectiles, couldn't track the solid bullets. "It's like fighting opponents who only know how to box," An Young-soo reported over the communication channel. "They have no idea what to do when you tackle them." The human attack continued with devastating effectiveness. Ships that had easily adapted to every form of advanced weaponry found themselves helpless against bullets, shells, and conventional explosives. The Devourers began to fall back, their perfect formation dissolving into confusion. But Captain Bae Soo-young noticed something troubling on her sensors. "The enemy is regrouping," she reported. "They're trying to understand what we're doing." Admiral Choi had seen the same thing. "All ships, maximum attack speed. We need to press our advantage before they figure out how to counter kinetic weapons." The human fleet pushed forward, their primitive chemical rockets carrying them deeper into enemy territory. Behind them, the retreating alien alliance began to slow their flight. For the first time since the battle began, the tide was turning. The first human salvo had caught the Devourers completely off guard. Now, as the geometric ships tried to understand what was happening to them, the human fleet pressed their attack with increasing ferocity. Captain Lee Min-ho watched from Seoul's pride as his tungsten rods punched hole after hole in enemy hulls. Each railgun shot created a brief star as the projectile burned through the Devourer's armor at incredible speed. The ancient machines had no answer for such simple, devastating physics. "Target their command ship," ordered Admiral Choi from the carrier Incheon, the large one in the center of their formation. The Devourer command vessel was a nightmare of impossible geometry. It seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow, its surfaces folding in on themselves in ways that hurt to look at directly. But for all its otherworldly appearance, it was still made of matter that could be destroyed. Commander O.C. Jin coordinated the attack from the Incheon's flight deck. All fighter squadrons, begin your attack runs. Target the command ships, weapon ports, and what look like sensor arrays. Fighter pilot An Young-soo led the first wave of human fighters toward the massive enemy vessel. His squadron carried nothing more sophisticated than autocannons and conventional missiles, but that was proving to be exactly what they needed. "Remember," he told his pilots over the communication channel, "these things are used to fighting. Energy weapons, they don't know how to deal with good old-fashioned bullets." The Devourer point defense systems tried to intercept the incoming fighters, but their targeting systems couldn't properly track solid projectiles. Streams of depleted uranium rounds raked across the command ship's hull, tearing through armor that had easily deflected molecular disruptors. But the real surprise was yet to come. Weapons Officer John Min-woo aboard the destroyer Gwangju's Thunder had been waiting for this moment. His ship carried humanity's most controversial weapon, something the aliens had dismissed as hopelessly primitive. "Admiral," he called over the communication channel, requesting permission to initiate Protocol Thunder. Admiral Choi understood immediately. "All ships clear the target area. Gwangju's Thunder is going nuclear." The aliens watching the battle couldn't believe what they were hearing. Nuclear weapons were considered obsolete by galactic standards, too crude and uncontrolled for modern warfare. Every advanced species had moved beyond such primitive explosives centuries ago. "Nuclear weapons?" transmitted General Kroon from his retreating flagship. "Against enemies with adaptive technology? Those explosions will only make them stronger." "Watch and learn," replied Admiral Choi grimly. John Min-woo launched a spread of nuclear missiles toward the Devourer command ship. The warheads were simple, by galactic standards, fusion devices with chemical rocket propulsion, but they carried something the Devourers had never encountered before. The first nuclear explosion lit up space like a miniature sun. The fusion reaction released raw, chaotic energy in every direction. Heat, radiation, electromagnetic pulses, and gravitational waves all mixed together in one overwhelming burst. The Devourer's energy absorption technology tried to process the nuclear blast, but the sheer chaos of the explosion overloaded their systems. Unlike the focused beams and controlled particles they were designed to handle, nuclear fire was pure, uncontrolled destruction. "Their adaptive matrix is failing," reported Dr. Park Soo-jin as she analyzed the sensor data. "Nuclear explosions produce too many different types of energy simultaneously. Their systems can't adapt to chaos." More nuclear warheads detonated around the Devourer fleet. Each explosion created a brief star, and with each blast, the enemy ship's adaptive defenses became more confused and overwhelmed. Captain Kwon Hyo-jin of Daegu's Resolve took advantage of the chaos to reveal another of humanity's primitive weapons. "Deploying kinetic kill vehicles," she announced. The kill vehicles were perhaps the simplest weapons in space. Chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds. They had no guidance systems, no warheads, no sophisticated technology at all. They were just very heavy objects moving very fast. But that simplicity made them perfect against the Devourers. The enemy ship's sensors couldn't classify them as weapons because they were too basic. Their point defense systems ignored them because they didn't use energy. Their adaptive armor couldn't counter them because there was nothing to adapt to. The kill vehicles struck like hammers from the gods. Each impact released kinetic energy equivalent to several tons of explosives, but in a focused point that the Devourer's distributed armor couldn't handle. Ships that had shrugged off quantum torpedoes cracked open like eggs under the kinetic bombardment. "This is incredible," transmitted Fleet Leader Zixandra from her retreating bioship. "Your primitive weapons are more effective than anything. We've tried." The sky began to fill with the distinctive glow of human weapons. White-hot trails marked the passage of railgun projectiles. Orange blooms of chemical explosives painted the void in fire. The brief suns of nuclear detonations created shadows among the stars. Captain Bae-Soo Young of Busan's Hammer added her own contribution to the light show. Her ship deployed what the military called metal rain, thousands of small projectiles fired from magnetic launchers. Each piece of shrapnel was different in size and velocity, creating a storm of metal that no adaptive system could predict or counter. The Devourer formation began to break apart under the kinetic assault. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination now scattered as their command structures failed. Some tried to adapt their tactics, but they had been designed to fight a very different kind of war. Engineer Yoon Hae-jin monitored the battle from Seoul's Pride. "Captain, I'm detecting something interesting about the enemy adaptive systems." "What have you found?" asked Lee Min-ho. "They're trying to learn from our attacks, but they keep failing. Every kinetic weapon we use is slightly different. Mass, different velocity, different composition. There's no pattern for them to adapt to." "Unlike energy weapons." "Exactly. Energy weapons follow predictable laws of physics. Plasma always behaves like plasma. Particle beams always follow the same principles. But kinetic weapons can be anything. A tungsten rod, a chunk of iron, a nuclear warhead, a handful of ball bearings. The variables are infinite." The realization spread through the human fleet that they had stumbled upon something profound in their pursuit of ever more sophisticated weapons. The galaxy had forgotten the fundamental principle of warfare: unpredictability. Captain No Tae-kyung of Ulsan's Pride demonstrated this principle by launching what his crew called the kitchen sink, a spread of every different kinetic weapon his ship carried. Railgun slugs, conventional missiles, nuclear warheads, kinetic penetrators, and simple chunks of metal all flew toward the same target. The Devourer ship's adaptive systems tried desperately to counter the incoming barrage, but each weapon required a different response. By the time the alien technology figured out how to stop the railgun slugs, the missiles had already hit. When it adapted to the conventional explosives, the nuclear warheads arrived. The ship was destroyed by the simple expedient of being hit by too many different things at once. "All human ships," Admiral Choi's voice rang out over the communication channels. "Continue the attack. Show them what human ingenuity looks like." The human fleet spread out across the battlefield, each ship attacking with its own combination of primitive weapons. No two vessels used exactly the same tactics, making it impossible for the Devourers to develop a unified response. Fighter pilot An Young-soo led another strafing run, this time using a mix of armor-piercing rounds and high-explosive shells. "It's like teaching an advanced mathematician to fight," he reported. They know all the complex formulas, but they can't handle simple addition. The sky continued to glow with human weapons as 13 ships systematically dismantled an enemy fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The light of their primitive fires was becoming a beacon of hope for the retreating alien alliance. But the battle was far from over. The Devourers were beginning to regroup, and their response to humanity's kinetic weapons was about to become much more dangerous. As the battle intensified, the human fleet revealed the true depth of their primitive arsenal. Each ship carried weapons that the galactic community had dismissed as obsolete, but which now proved devastatingly effective against an enemy designed to counter advanced technology. Captain Quan Hyo-jin aboard Daegu's Resolve prepared to deploy her ship's most unusual weapon system. "All hands prepare for kinetic bombardment," she announced over the ship's communication system. The kinetic bombardment platform was exactly what its name suggested, a system designed to drop heavy objects on targets from orbit. On planets, it was used to destroy hardened bunkers and underground facilities. In space, it had never been tested against enemy ships. "Target the large geometric formation on our starboard side," ordered Quan Hyo-jin. "Deploy full spread." The platform released. Hundreds of tungsten telephone poles, each one accelerated to tremendous velocity by magnetic launchers. They spread out like a metal constellation, creating a cloud of destruction that no single-point defense system could stop. The Devourer ships tried to intercept the incoming projectiles, but their targeting systems couldn't handle the sheer number of different objects. Some were large and easy to track. Others were small and fast. A few spun as they flew, changing their radar signature with each rotation. The impact was spectacular. Tungsten rods punched through the geometric hulls like needles through fabric. The Devourer formation, which had maintained perfect coordination throughout the battle with the alien alliance, finally began to show signs of real damage. "Direct hits across the formation," reported Tactical Officer Han Dong-min from Seoul's Pride. "Enemy ships are breaking apart under kinetic stress." Fighter pilot An Young-soo led his squadron in another attack run, but this time he had a new trick to try. His fighters had been loaded with a mixture of ammunition types, armor-piercing rounds, explosive shells, and something called surprise packages. "What exactly are surprise packages?" asked his wingman over the communication channel. "Exactly what they sound like," replied An Young-soo. "Our weapons specialists loaded random objects into our ammunition. Nuts, bolts, pieces of scrap metal, even some ball bearings from the machine shop." "Why would we fire garbage at the enemy?" "Because the Devourer's adaptive systems are designed to counter predictable weapons. Garbage is completely unpredictable." The fighter squadron opened fire on a cluster of smaller Devourer vessels. Streams of mixed ammunition raked across their hulls. Some bullets penetrated armor, others exploded on impact, and a few just bounced off harmlessly. The random nature of the attack confused the enemy point defense systems completely. One Devourer ship's adaptive armor tried to harden against armor-piercing rounds, making it vulnerable to explosive shells. When it adjusted to resist explosions, the simple metal fragments punched through like the armor wasn't there. The ship's defense systems cycled through dozens of configurations without finding one that worked against such chaotic attacks. Captain Bei Su-young of Busan's Hammer revealed her own contribution to humanity's arsenal of unpredictability. "Deploy the scattergun," she ordered. The scattergun was a weapon that shouldn't have worked in space combat. It fired hundreds of small projectiles in a wide spread, like an enormous shotgun. Each pellet was too small to do serious damage on its own, but together they created a wall of metal that nothing could pass through. The Devourer ships tried to navigate around the scatter shot, but Captain Bei had anticipated this. She fired multiple bursts in different directions, creating overlapping fields of projectiles that forced the enemy ships into predictable paths. "Now, hit them with the real weapons," she ordered. Busan's Hammer's railguns fired tungsten rods along the paths where the Devourer ships had been forced to retreat. The enemy vessels, trapped by the scatter shot and unable to maneuver freely, took direct hits that tore through their hulls like paper. Aboard the carrier Incheon, Admiral Choi watched as his small fleet systematically dismantled an enemy that had defeated 800 of the galaxy's most advanced warships. But he also noticed something troubling on his sensors. "The Devourers are adapting," he reported to his fleet. "Not to our weapons, but to our tactics. They're starting to scatter their formations to reduce the effectiveness of area attacks." Dr. Park Soo-jin studied the enemy movement patterns. "They're learning that our weapons work best against concentrated targets. If they spread out, our kinetic bombardments will be less effective." But Fleet Engineer Shin Eun-jung had been waiting for exactly this development. "Admiral, permission to deploy the magnetic net?" "What's the magnetic net?" asked Admiral Choi. "Something our engineers developed for asteroid mining," explained Shin Eun-jung. "It's a network of magnetic field generators that can grab and manipulate metal objects in space." "How does that help us in combat?" "The Devourer ships have metal components. If we can grab them with magnetic fields, we can pull them back together into concentrated formations." Admiral Choi considered this for a moment. It was exactly the kind of simple, practical solution that had made human weapons so effective against advanced enemies. "Deploy the net." The Incheon launched a spread of small satellites, each one equipped with powerful magnetic field generators. The satellites spread out around the Devourer fleet and activated their systems simultaneously. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The geometric ships, which had been trying to scatter to avoid kinetic bombardments, found themselves pulled back together by invisible magnetic forces. Their own metal hulls became anchors that dragged them into tight formations. "Beautiful," commented Captain Lee Min-ho as he watched the enemy ships cluster together helplessly. "Now they're sitting ducks for area bombardment." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic bombardment platforms released clouds of tungsten rods. Nuclear missiles detonated in carefully timed sequences. Scatterguns filled space with walls of metal fragments. The concentrated Devourer formation had no way to escape the overlapping fields of destruction. But the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Commander Nam Gi-tae had been quietly preparing something aboard the Incheon that would change the nature of space combat forever. "Admiral, he reported. "The mass driver is ready for deployment." "What's a mass driver?" asked Admiral Choi. "Think of it as the biggest railgun ever built," explained Namgite. "Instead of firing tungsten rods, it fires asteroids." The Inchin had been quietly capturing small asteroids throughout the battle, using its mining equipment to grab chunks of rock and metal from nearby debris fields. Now those asteroids became ammunition for a weapon that dwarfed anything else in the human arsenal. "Target the largest enemy formation," ordered Admiral Choi. "Let's see how their adaptive armor handles a mountain." The mass driver launched a house-sized asteroid at nearly 10% of light speed. The rock burned like a comet as it crossed space, its surface glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction despite being in vacuum. The Devourer ships tried to intercept the incoming asteroid, but their point defense systems were designed for much smaller targets. The rock was simply too big and too fast to stop with conventional weapons. The impact created a blast that could be seen from neighboring star systems. The asteroid struck the center of the Devourer formation with the force of a nuclear weapon, but delivered as pure kinetic energy. Ships that had shrugged off molecular disruptors and quantum torpedoes were simply vaporized by the impact. "That," said Admiral Choi with satisfaction, "is how you solve problems with human engineering." The Devourer fleet was in full retreat now, their perfect formations broken and their adaptive technology overwhelmed by the chaos of kinetic warfare. But the human fleet wasn't finished. They had one more surprise to unveil, something that would demonstrate the true philosophy behind human weapons design. Captain No-Tae Kyung of Ulsan's Pride activated his ship's final weapon system. "Deploying the equalizer," he announced. The equalizer was the simplest weapon of all, a cargo container filled with every piece of metal debris the ship could collect. Scrap from battle damage, spare parts from the machine shop, even the crew's personal metal belongings. When fired from a magnetic launcher, it became a cloud of completely random projectiles. "Fire," ordered No-Tae Kyung. The cloud of debris spread out like a metal nebula, each piece following its own unpredictable trajectory. The Devourer ship's adaptive systems tried desperately to counter the attack, but there was no pattern to adapt to. It was pure chaos, given physical form and fired at the enemy at high velocity. The sky glowed brighter than ever as human weapons filled space with the light of kinetic destruction. 13 ships had taken on an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, and they were winning through the simple expedient of hitting things very hard with other things. As Devourer ships began falling back in genuine retreat for the first time in the battle, the alien fleets that had fled earlier slowly turned to witness something they had thought impossible. The primitive humans were not just surviving against the ancient enemy. They were winning. Council Prime Vextal's voice crackled across the communication channels from the distant alien flagship. The translation system struggled to convey the mixture of disbelief and awe in the leader's words. "How is this possible? Your weapons were dismissed as obsolete relics." Admiral Choi responded while watching his destroyers systematically tear apart another Devourer formation. "Sometimes the old ways work because they're simple. Simple things are hard to break." General Kroon of the Vorthak requested permission to approach the human fleet. His massive dreadnought had taken severe damage from Devourer weapons, its advanced hull scarred and partially melted. Admiral Choi, we owe you an apology. We did not understand the wisdom of your approach. Dr. Park. Sujin took the opportunity to explain what they had discovered. The Devourers evolved to fight energy-based warfare. Every advanced species in the galaxy uses some form of energy projection. Plasma, particles, quantum fields. Your weapons all follow the same basic principles. But your weapons follow different principles? Asked Fleet Leader Zixandra from her retreating bioship. Our weapons follow the oldest principle of all, replied Park Soo-jin. Mass times velocity equals energy. When you hit something hard enough with something heavy enough, it breaks. No advanced technology can change basic physics. Captain Lee Min-ho demonstrated this principle by firing another tungsten rod at a struggling Devourer vessel. The projectile punched through the geometric hull and continued out the other side, carrying debris with it into the void. But how did your species develop such weapons? Asked the crystal being Brightsinger. Surely you attempted to create energy weapons like the rest of us? We did, admitted Admiral Choi, but we couldn't afford the exotic materials and zero-point energy systems that your weapons require, so we learned to make every gram of metal count. Captain No Tae-kyung of Ulsan's Pride provided a perfect example. His ship had just deployed a new type of ammunition, simple iron slugs wrapped around small fusion cores. We call these kinetic nuclear hybrids, he explained. They look like debris to enemy sensors until the moment they hit. The alien observers watched in fascination as the hybrid rounds struck their targets. The Devourer ship's adaptive systems registered them as harmless metal fragments right up until the fusion cores detonated on impact. The combination of kinetic penetration and nuclear explosion was devastating. Your species weaponized poverty, observed General Kroon with something that might have been respect. You turned limitations into advantages. We turned necessity into innovation, corrected Captain Bae Soo-young as she launched another spread of scattershot. When you can't afford to waste resources, you learn to use everything. The human fleet continued their assault with increasing confidence. Each ship had become a laboratory of destruction, testing new combinations of kinetic weapons against an enemy that had no answer for such creativity. Fighter pilot An Young-soo led his squadron in a demonstration of human tactical flexibility. His fighters carried different ammunition loads, some with armor-piercing rounds, others with explosive shells, and a few with the completely random surprise packages that had proven so effective. The key is unpredictability, he explained over the communication channel as his fighters strafed a Devourer formation. No two attacks are exactly the same. The enemy can't adapt to chaos. Engineer Yoon Hai-jin from Seoul's Pride had been monitoring the battle data throughout the engagement. Admiral, I'm detecting something significant about the Devourer adaptive systems. What have you found? Asked Admiral Choi. They're not just failing to adapt to our weapons. They're actually becoming less effective against energy attacks as, well, it's like our kinetic assault is damaging their ability to process any kind of incoming threat. Dr. Park Soo-jin studied the data with growing excitement. The adaptive matrix must be overloading. It's trying to process so many different kinetic attacks that it's losing efficiency across all systems. This revelation spread through both fleets, human and alien. The Devourers weren't just vulnerable to kinetic weapons. Their encounter with such chaotic attacks was degrading their defenses against all forms of combat. "Permission to test a theory," requested Captain Quan Hyo-jin from Daegu's Resolve. "What kind of theory?" asked Admiral Choi. "If their adaptive systems are overloaded, they might be vulnerable to energy weapons again. I'd like to request fire, support from our alien allies." Admiral Choi considered this carefully. "General Kroon, are your weapons systems operational?" "Partially," replied the Vorthak commander. "We have about 30% effectiveness remaining. Target the Devourer ships that have taken the most kinetic damage from our attacks. Let's see if they can still adapt to your molecular disruptors." The Vorthak dreadnought moved closer to the battle zone and opened fire with its remaining weapons. Molecular disruptor beams reached out toward Devourer ships that had been battered by human kinetic attacks. The result was remarkable. The advanced, energy weapons that had been completely useless at the beginning of the battle now cut through Devourer hulls like butter. The ship's adaptive systems, overwhelmed by kinetic chaos, couldn't respond to the familiar energy attacks. "Incredible," breathed Fleet Leader Zixandra. "Your kinetic weapons broke their defenses against everything else." The revelation changed the entire dynamic of the battle. The alien alliance began moving closer to the combat zone, their confidence restored by the knowledge that their weapons could be effective again. But the humans weren't finished demonstrating their approach to warfare. Commander O.C. Jin launched another wave of fighters from the Incheon, this time carrying a special payload. "What are those fighters carrying?" asked General Kroon. "Marines," replied Admiral Choi simply. "Marines! You're boarding enemy vessels?" "Sometimes. The most advanced weapon is a soldier with a rifle," explained Admiral Choi. "The Devourers adapted to fight ship-to-ship combat. They never expected to deal with humans walking through their corridors." Lieutenant Colonel Lim Ji-hoon led the boarding assault on the largest remaining Devourer vessel. His Marines carried the most primitive weapons in the human arsenal, rifles that fired simple metal bullets and explosives that used chemical reactions. The Devourers had no defense against such basic attacks. Their internal security systems were designed to counter energy weapons and advanced technology. They had no protocols for dealing with humans with guns moving through their ship. "Boarding successful," reported Lim Ji-hoon over the communication channel. "Enemy resistance is minimal. Their technology doesn't know how to fight individual soldiers." The sight of human Marines taking control of a Devourer command ship sent shockwaves through both fleets. The most advanced enemy the galaxy had ever faced was being defeated by soldiers with rifles, weapons that predated space travel by centuries. "This changes everything," transmitted Council Prime Vextal. "We must reconsider our entire approach to military technology." Admiral Choi watched as his small fleet continued to dismantle the enemy formation. "Perhaps it's time the galaxy learned the difference between sophistication and effectiveness." The human ships pressed their attack with renewed vigor, their primitive weapons glowing like beacons in the darkness. Behind them, the alien alliance began to follow, their own weapons effective once again thanks to the chaos of kinetic warfare. The Devourers, faced with an enemy they couldn't understand or adapt to, began a general retreat toward the edge of the galaxy. For the first time in 10,000 years, they had encountered something that their perfect technology couldn't overcome: the simple, brutal effectiveness of hitting things with other things.